shouldn't laugh anymore.
Welcome to this video. It's going to be a little bit longer than usual, as for I will give away a few sentences to each rank on this list of my top 10 favorite Final Fantasies of all time. And since then we have a wide range to pick from. This is my opinion, so don't feel free to insult me, but feel free to give yours in the comment section below. What should have made this list? I have to notify massive spoiler alert, you have been warned. As far as everything's clear now, we can start with the 10th rank on my list. Now I gotta say, what really pissed me off with this game is the difficulty. I would easily claim 5 as the hardest Final Fantasy in the saga, because you gotta deal with the way you train your characters, and you are made to believe that you can do it any way you like, but later the game shows you that you cannot. That is what confuses me so at 5. There are some boss fights which are a lot easier with the right team and the right jobs, and still hard. So with your own matchup of the jobs, it's nearly impossible. I remember a cave where several really hard foes appear in awkwardly short periods of time, and you couldn't save. Like, at all. Without a strategy guide, I'd totally be wasted. Even so, I really like not only the characters, but also the design and the logic of the two worlds in 5. Firstly, you experience the world of Lena and Bards, the Typhoon Castle, the Pirate Cave, and as soon as you meet Galuf coming out of a friggin' meteorite, you learn from another world where Gilgamesh also lives, and it's much different from the one you're currently on. For me, it felt surprising and adventurous, and so was the story plot. I played it blindly, even though I used the strategy guide sometimes, and I was so shocked by Ferris being a woman. And even though I was wondering all the time how they're gonna put Cryle up to the team if it's only 4 members allowed, I was shattered by Galuf's death. Mostly I just smile at the deaths of people, especially old geezers, you know, like Tella or Maester Keenock, because they're just meant to die. Everything in the plot points towards it. It's no surprise anymore. All you gotta do is wait until it finally happens. But losing Galuf let me shed a tear. I somehow like the meteor-traveling grandpa and his hyperactive granddaughter. And what also won my heart is the dragons. The noise they make every time they're flattered or so, or waiting to take off, is so adorable. I know it's only a game, but I fell in love with these beasts and could feel the bond the two princesses have for each of them. I think this is a unique thing in the franchise. Look, I know they're all different to each other in countless ways, but there's one thing that really differs 12 from the others. It's not character-focused. Although we have great figures, there is Bolfir, whom I feel attached to mostly, his partner and best friend Fran, who's probably the sexiest in the group. We have the strong-hearted princes, the orphans Vaughn and Penello, Captain Bosch of Ronsenburg.
I'm Captain Bosch von Ronsenburg of Dalmasca.
But all along, I was waiting for more heartbreaking moments. A death of an important person, somebody hurt somebody, a love triangle, I don't know. I really missed that part.
The best intentions invite the worst kind of trouble.
I want to know the background stories of the protagonists. These come off badly in 12, which prevented me from getting too close to them. I feel it rather focused on how politics work. We had way too many persons who all have a say in something of a political issue. We find conspiracies, treason, lots of power struggle. It was a different experience of gaming. It wasn't what I expected when I play a Final Fantasy, but I'm always open to new ideas, and this game managed to implement this new idea and still created a masterpiece. The world, with all the cities whose names I can remember, is gigantic. I don't like the battle system, neither the license board or the endless search for items. but the mob hunt is amazing, and also the way Square rearranged the travel with the airships. A game we had waited 10 years for. A game that should provide all the new fans with another heroic adventure and breathtaking moments. Well, we received an adventure, and a gigantic world, and beautiful cutscenes. Though I missed the deepness in the characters. Due to the enormously long working process, I was a little bit disappointed by 15. I love the world they created. It was wonderful to see how Square went back to the whole king, prince, and protect your kingdom issue. They may got inspired by 4. But in my view, they cling way too strict to the open world thing, so they just passed a proper launch from the story. I definitely wanted to know more about the city, Insomnia. I hoped I could walk around with Noctis in a moment where everything was still fine. And the relation to his companions gains only little explanation. I knew they had been best friends ever since, but I wanted to know why. Without the anime or the spin-off, you wouldn't have no clue at all.
Might already be a lost cause.
And what about his father? I loved his appearance. I wanted to see more times on screen, having an influence on Noctis and his acting. It's the same with Luna Freya and her super cool brother. They both have a very strong potential. A calm but brave young lady fighting for her kingdom and her prince, and Ravers on the other hand, plagued by good and evil thoughts, struggling what side to stand on. And what did Square do? Kill them off. Sorry, that is truly something I can't forgive. However, the battle system was really, really damn good. Fast, agile, varied, good looking. That's how I like it. The mob hunting was extremely fun, and I also like the quests, though there were too much of them. It would have been better if they saved most of them for the final chapters. Through this way, I got lost into monster hunting for hours till I was already on level 42, realizing that I still got stuck in the 3rd chapter, and forgot about everything what had happened so far. I like 15 for its potential, and its high likeliness of playing it again. But there is a huge distance now to rank 7, which is Final Fantasy VIII. It's a game that you get close to from the very beginning. The soundtrack is catchy and transfers you into a mode that says, "Ooh, cool, another Final Fantasy!" And it's exactly as fun as the last one. But don't underestimate this one. At first, Squall just seems to be the typical reticent, gloomy-looking hero hiding a terrifying past. Actually, he's only an orphan seeking for love. He finds out he has a sister, wants to know the truth about his parents, and has to admit that he's got a thing for Rinoa, and ends up devotedly trying to keep her safe. We do not get to know much more about Zell, Selphie, Quistis, or even Cypher. 8 narrows down to the relation of Squall and Rinoa that makes it kind of a love story. But a beautiful one. The theory of time compression and the complex subject with the witches fully got me. Also because it's closer to weird things that happen in our world. 8 triggers the most conspiracies and strange theories by a long way, and it makes it therefore unforgettable in its secretiveness. Every time I play it again, I detect something new I didn't recognize in the last round. I must say the whole junction and GF method sort of annoyed me. Collecting all the GF was challenging but motivating. Replugging them each time you changed the party though was nerve-wracking. And I'm not a huge fan of leveling foes, but on the other hand, it was a matter of keeping up the difficulty, which can be tolerated. Next to 5 and 2, Final Fantasy VI belongs to the most underrated parts of the series. I didn't want to play it for a long time because I didn't know much about it. It just didn't feel exciting. But one time I was surfing the internet, I hear that 6 is the personal favorite of Nobuo Uematsu, so I gave it a shot. And got dazzled. Only the opening scene caught me so bad that I immediately got torn into the happenings. Terra is such a special woman, she's one of my favorite characters, and Locke, Celeste, and Edgar are fabulous and dramatic too in their own ways. I think they have been created quite realistic and detailed. I believe 6 offers you the most characters to play with in comparison with other Final Fantasies, but it never loses its emphasis on the protagonists, and this is a great example how I imagine a good character presentation ought to be. You learn just enough of the background stories to feel sorry for them or understand their motivations, but not too much to lose concentration on the main plot. The music is incomparable, in particular the idea of the opera song In Between, and the legendary fight against Ultras right after the show. Sorry, I had to take that one in. But the game wouldn't have gained its cult status without the legend growing around Kafka. Somehow, he's become a paragon for the perfect villain, and we'll never forget him. An event that shocked me was the attempted suicide of Celeste, finding herself in a total ruin of her homeland after Kafka has crashed everything and brought it out of balance. Square didn't have that much resources in 1994, and they managed to make it look horrendous, almost realistic. You may have heard of a theory claiming that the whole setting of 6 constitutes the events of the Third Reich. I'll be doing a single tribute to that in the foreseeable future. But let's go on with the next spot. Nine, 11, and 14 are those who extremely go with the Baroque style. It took a while till I got used to this, I admit, but as soon as it happened, I began to love it. The battle system, the music, the way they talk, the different ways they talk, all of this creates an atmosphere you can't run away from. You're forced to follow what is happening. And thank God it's a good happening. Those who know me a little bit can tell that I admire deep philosophies, and if a game has a timeless message to deliver, it's a masterpiece and a treasure for me. 9 issues one of those huge philosophical questions that haven't been answered so far. Why does one decide to live good and the other one decides to use others to get advantage from them? Zidane appears a little simple at first, but is actually, in his naivety, the finest of them all. He makes sure his friends are safe before he goes back to the place where they had just fought Kuja and everything's falling apart, but he still takes the time to sit next up to him so he wouldn't be alone. Although he is his Archfiend and has done so much damage to him and Garnet, this is something that moved me deeply, and the topic with the other world, Terra, and its submissive inhabitants. Then there's Vivi, who I could cuddle every time I see him, and the tragic reality of the Black Mages that issues even a sense of life, and the question what would happen after your death. I can only say that this game made me think a lot about it, and it managed to deliver a feeling of home each time I played again or listened to the music. I turned terribly nostalgic, and I will never forget the beautiful ending, which makes you think all of this was just an epic stage play. Genius. I have a thing for 4 because it was one of the first games I've ever played, and I remember borrowing the DS Lite of my friend for only a few weeks, ending up late at night, playing it all the time. You know, I don't need much to have the perfect gaming experience. I love the good old knight in service of his fair king and a massive kingdom with strong friends at his side and a beautiful woman's heart to win. 4 has passed all these demands and even gave me more. The music is something that is constantly mind-blowing. I love every damn track, and it gives you a feeling of just, I don't know, you feel fantastic, like you could reach anything you want. The battles are very diversified and tricky. The bosses in 4 can be really hard and suitatory, but it's always feasible. Unlike the After Years, who is easy as fuck the whole time, and then the mysterious girl appears and whacks you like a total noob. Searching for the best armor and items was fun, and also exploring all the caves and cities on the map. The graphics were okay to the time, the DS remake was even better. The story was touching and profound. A black knight who begins to question what he's been doing in service of the king, and finally becomes a paladin after fighting himself. The rivalry between Cecil and Kane over Rosa's heart, Kane's struggle with Golbez, two brothers going entirely different ways and finding together again in the end while they fight the evil itself side to side. What more could one want? That's all a good story would need. I fell in love with Cecil. He is the embodiment of what is good, even more than the Warrior of Light. The only thing that made me roll my eyes was the notorious dying in this game. Anna, Tella, Cecil's parents, Edge's parents, the twins, allegedly Rydia, Young, Sid. Eventually you wouldn't shed a tear after the third death, cause it's not a surprise anymore. And the sad atmosphere is somehow forced. Especially because the playable characters all come back at the end, except for the wizard. Sorry, Tella. Now, 13 is either being hated or loved. No other game of the franchise lets the fandom drift apart so largely. I never understood why. All for this infamous hallway? So what? I mean, the hallway does make sense in the game. Of course, we're used to exploring freely in an open world, being able to enter territories, keeping monsters that are way too strong for us in the moment. But why does every component which made us love Final Fantasy has irrevocably to be the same? 13 tried to create something new, and I agree, if the story had been lame, the hallway would have sucked, because then you got a bad story and are stuck in it for good. But it's not. Guys, with Lightning we have some legend of a character. She really does define this game for me. I'd even put her up to the icons like Cloud or Sephiroth. The others lack the suspense a little bit. I like them, almost all of them. But they weren't as special as Lightning in my view. Many players were of the same mind, that's why Square had based the whole trilogy on her. And I couldn't get enough. First of all, it was the very first game of the series to have a total orchestral soundtrack. And for me, as a musician and as a true Final Fantasy fan, the music is one of the main parts without I can't get by. And the world is perfect in its limitation. You could firstly not only look around, but also look up to the sky. But still you knew you were being pursued all the time. And I loved that feeling because it dragged you into the story and the characters' thoughts. The areas are very much different to one another, and I didn't miss anything. Have you ever taken a look at how much detail they added to the entourage? And so many cutscenes. They weren't boring at all, and the voice actors did a great job. Sometimes it was a bit much of a discussion about their focus and rescuing Sarah, which could be annoying, but that's something I can forgive. Only thing that really fretted me was this malformation concerning the battle system. All in all, it was quite fair when you die, and you had lots of strategies to use in order to beat a villain, but the fact that you can only fight with one character in a battle damned the enthusiasm, and rearranging your paradigms each time you changed the party could have been solved better. The battle system in Lightning Returns, though, rocks. It is a different story focusing on only one character. The ending of the trilogy is one of my favorite cutscenes of all time. It's astonishing, masterfully designed, and the way they decided to let Lightning's story end gave me a cold shiver. There isn't much to say about this one. Everybody knows it, everybody loves it, it's everybody's favorite, and I know why. It was the first game to have 3D graphics, the battle system was new and overwhelming, the world and the NPCs seemed livelier through the enhanced graphics, and of course Squaresoft went viral with 3 super cool characters at a time. Cloud Strife, Tifa Lockhart, Sephiroth. Cloud is like the epitome of a hero because he doesn't seem like one in the first place. He's depressive, doesn't talk much, introverted, and has amnesia. But the anti-hero thing has made him iconic instead. Reason why Tifa is being loved is obvious, I suppose, and the myth around Sephiroth is explained by only his looks. His spooky white hair, his abnormally long Masamune, the dark voice, and his leather suit. He was just made to be a villain. But also the story matches the appearances of the characters. I will never forget the scene where Sephiroth burns Nibelheim down, and 7 offers a few scenes like these. Aeris' death shocked the whole fanbase. It was something no one really counted with, and this is what made her death so devastating and cruel. It was the same with Zack's death. I played Crisis Core first and had no idea that Zack's story was only being explained to get an in-depth look on Cloud's past, or rather the circumstances of his amnesia. So his death was the most shocking scene I've ever watched so far. I cried my fucking eyes out and I didn't want to believe it. The whole time I was playing 7, I secretly hoped for him coming back, for he's my favorite male hero of all times. I gotta say that I have a deeper relation to Crisis Core than to the main game, but just because I fell in love with Zack and his story. It touched me in a more intense way than Cloud's story, actually. I found it more dramatic, also because Sephiroth's background is being extensively issued. Still, the making of how Tifa makes it to bring all the pieces of memory back to one and heal Cloud's amnesia was imposing and affecting. The soundtrack scores many hits that stay in your head for all eternity. One Winged Angel, On the Verge of Assault, the main theme, Aeris' theme, it's sublime, we don't need to talk about it. I found the world a little bit black and grey. I missed a few healthy spots like a romantic blue shining forest or a super futuristic multicolored city like Estar in 8. But like the hallway in 13, is this a matter that somehow fits the conditions of the world, the story plot, so I can live with it and it doesn't affect my marked preference for 7. The background information of the characters and the plot bothered me as well. I found it pretty interesting how Square came up with the idea in the first place and where they got their inspiration from. For example, just Google the name Sephiroth, where it derives from. You'll come across the Jewish Kabbalah, which is quite interesting. And all the characters are simply being noticed. That's what I criticized about 8. You know enough about your teammates that you can identify with them. And there's so many of them who are special in the whole universe of 7, apart from the main characters. Vincent, Yuffie, Sid, Red 13, Genesis, Cisne, Kadaj, Lucrezia, Rufus, I could endlessly keep talking. Now before I come to my top pick, which is probably obvious by now, I have a few honorable mentions and will explain in one sentence why they haven't made it up to this list, although they are great games. Final Fantasy II has actually very likable characters, beautiful music, a thrilling story, and an awesome villain. It's underrated in my opinion. The matter that messed the whole thing up was the incredibly unfair rate of random battles and the dungeons, which were almost impossible to get out alive. Dissidia is fun. We get to see all of our favorite characters together. The soundtrack is really nice, but it's awfully hard, and nobody gets the story after all. Final Fantasy III, though, has a neat battle system instead, and the balance of the difficulty in dungeons and boss fights is good. What I didn't like was the depiction of the protagonists. They seemed a bit lifeless, and I couldn't identify with them.
Essentially,
if somebody asks you about the plot in Type 0, you can't really answer. You can't. Nobody remembers all the countries and civil wars and commanders. I never even watched the whole cutscene. But this game is extremely fun. You have so many characters to choose and to level up, and you can play it again and again and again, and until the 4th time you have new challenges and quests each round. Last but not least, we have Final Fantasy Tactics, and I can't really say something bad about it. I liked it all over. It probably has one of the most complex story plots, but if I had to choose, I'd rather pick a main game because of battle system, graphics. But still guys, Tactics is sublime. You need to play it. By now, it isn't much of a surprise anymore that 10 is my absolute favorite of this list. My favorite of all games in general. It was the very first Final Fantasy for me, the part with which everything had started, and I lose myself in nostalgia and sentiment just looking at the cover. I played almost each version, the PS2 version, the PS3 version, the PS4 version, at least a couple of times. I have so many save games I stopped counting, and I could play it again, and again, and again, anytime. I never get tired of this game, and it's the only game that can make me do this. Everything's perfect from the beginning to the end. The story is complex and affecting as hell. I cried so bad at the ending where Orin leaves us. I cried when Tidus says his dad farewell. I was in shock when Yuna was forced to marry and later fell from the platform, or when the group was falsely being sentenced, or the most common known dancing scene at Kilika. I was sharing the thrill with the characters the whole time. You have Tidus, who you just need to love. He's so clumsy and naive, but has his heart in the right place. Then Yuna, who's incredibly strong and determined for her age. The mysterious Lulu, Waka, who will always be at your side when you're in trouble. The silent but honorable Ranso Kimari. The ever cheeky and cheerful Riku, and of course Orin, who's just amazing. The story gripped me from the very beginning. It's perfectly directed and suspensefully created. Sin is always number one on the hit list, but there are lots of side plots which aren't less thrilling. The never-ending fight with Seymour alone is an affair by itself. Speaking of fights, the battle system in 10 will always be the uncontested winner of the franchise. It is balanced, clear, swift, and never too easy. You have plenty incentives to keep playing after you've beaten the final boss, completing the monster wrench, crafting your weapons and armory, mastering the sphere grid, leveling up your Aeons, defeating all the black Aeons, including penance. It gives you enough reason to stick with it. As expected, the music is wonderful, mentioning To Xanarkand, the ending theme, Calm Before the Storm, Seymour battle theme. I adore every single one of the soundtracks and keep playing it on the piano whenever I'm feeling sad or so. Considering its sequel, you gotta get straight that it will never catch up to the main game. But it wasn't meant to anyhow. 10-2 is quite fun. It stirs my collecting pleasures by maximizing and finding all the dress spheres. You knew most of the characters, so you were just keen on learning what's become of them in the meantime. So basically, it was just fan service, yet at a good standard, so that you can tell with a clear conscience, this is a good game. Plus, it provided us with 2 stunningly great FMVs of the 2 songs from Yuna. Right down the line, Final Fantasy is a magnificent series. Many games of the franchise deserve the top spot on this list, but I gave it to 10 for it will always be in my heart, and I know that I'm not alone with my passion for it. Well then, I hope you guys enjoyed. Any suggestions for videos, write it down below in the comment section. So have a nice day and see you